How's it going, everybody? I am Ruby Burrito, and I am back to talk about the personal story, dungeons, fractals, raids, meta events, and pretty much everything about PVE content. So, I just made a video about the personal story. I talked about how you have the story journal, you have the base expansion, or the base content from the original game, the original release, which should be free on Steam, Living World Season 1, which should now also be free, and then you have Living World Seasons 2, 3, and 4, 3 expansions, Heart of Thorns, Path of Fire, and End of Dragons, and the somewhat Living World season, the Icebrood Saga. On top of that, there are dungeons. Dungeons are instanced playable story that is, well, it was originally meant to be some of the endgame content. Originally, there weren't meant to be raids or any other endgame content. So if you look at the world map and you go to regular Tyria, the first one you get access to is over in the Plains of Ashford, and that is the dungeon Ascalonian Catacombs. Ascalonian Catacombs has a level requirement. If you go to dungeons here, you can actually see all of them. Catacombs, Caudicus's Manor, and I'll go to where they are on the map. Caudicus's Manor is going to be in Queensdale in the top right. Twilight Arbor is down in Caledon Forest in the top left. Sorrow's Embrace is down in Dredgehaunt Cliffs, right here, bottom left corner. Citadel of Flame is up in Fireheart Rise. Honor of the Waves in the neighboring map of Frostgorge Sound. Crucible of Eternity you have down in, there it is, Mount Maelstrom, and the ruined city of Ara. So, a couple things about the dungeons. As I said, there is a level requirement, and each of them has both a story and explorables. So, in order, you have 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 76, 78, and 80 as a requirement for story levels. And then for all of them, the explorable is 5 higher until you get to Honor of the Waves, which normally is 76, so the explorable requirement is 80. So, when you want to do the explorable, you have to do the story first on that character. You can see if you mouse over them, they have the explorable and story requirements here. There are 3 paths for all of the explorables, except for Ara, which has 4. Each of them gives you a coin reward for completion, as well as what is now the tokens or the Tales of Dungeon Delving. That is going to be found in your wallet. They used to have an individual currency for each of them, and now it is one combined currency. If you go to the merchant in Lion's Arch, you can see all of the different... I'm actually going to go to the one in Armistice Bastion. You should be able to see all of the different armor sets and weapon sets that are associated. Each one has a specific armor set. Each one of them has a specific weapon set. I'll go and show the Ascalonian Catacombs first for reference. Dungeon Merchant. If I go to Armor Pieces, Ascalonian Catacombs, and now you have Armor and Exotic Armor. The Exotic Armor is what is going to be the unique skin. Each of them costs a certain number of Tales of Dungeoneering, and there's 3 sets, and they each have different options for stats. So if I go to the top, the Performer Mask, this is for light, this is power, toughness, and vitality. If I scroll down, the next one is precision, vitality, and healing power. So you can choose which one you want. If I go to the heavy, which is going to be here, you can see what it would look like on a char. Real quick. There's this set of armor. Now, if I want to go back in and look at weapons, these weapons typically glow at night. The Ascalonian weapons do. And then the Gift of Ascalon is actually used to make legendaries. I have
Dismissed.
4 of them in my bank. If I scroll down, I have several of each of them actually to craft all of the legendaries. So, dungeons are not required to be done, period. If you want to get all of the story, the dungeon story follows Destiny's Edge and their journey. You can go the entire story and get to the final dungeon, which is Ara. To finish the story, you do have to do the Ara story dungeon. You can do that one alone. If you can do any of them alone if you have the talent and the build, but you don't need to do any of them until the end if you want the full story. Each of them has a piece of story. It tells how the different characters in Destiny's Edge come together, fall apart, the ins and outs of their relationships. Now, the next thing is going to be fractals. Fractals have 4 different levels of, I guess tiers would be a better way to put it. You have tier 1 through 4. There are 100 different fractal levels. I will take us now to Lion's Arch. Fractals were introduced a little bit after the game came out, and they are separate from the main story, but they do tell an interesting piece of history. So if I come over to here, I'm in the bottom portion of Lion's Arch, and if you're looking for a group to do them, you go to LFG, down to Fractals, and then you can do which section. I have not done Fractals all the way up to tier 4, but if I go here, I can see the different tiers. And you can see agony resistance. So, my personal agony resistance is 0. If I go to my equipment, you see how on Althea's Ashes, there's an infusion slot. You can get agony infusions that allow you to get agony resistance. And that is what allows you to do the higher tiers of fractals. There's only a certain number of fractals. You can see it starts with volcanic, but volcanic is back here at the end. So there's only so many total, and they repeat as you get higher. And this indication, you can see daily tier 1 cliffside, daily recommended fractal, scale 10. You get bonus rewards for doing those fractals. There are in all, there are 21 fractals. And as I said, that's not 100, so clearly it's going to go up. Right now, Sunqua Peak is the most difficult fractal that they have in each tier. So you do all of these in order. There's achievements for doing every single one of them. And the higher you go, the more agony resistance you need. So if I scroll over in the top right of the little blurb, you can see how much agony resistance you need for each one. And it slowly goes up. The one that I'm at, 43, requires 49. And I have, this is not my fractal character, I have agony resistance on a different one. For example, the Urban Battleground is a Flame Legion assault on an Ascalonian city, and it gives you some history on the Char-Human War. The Shattered Observatory is a take on the mini story that is the Fractals. Sunqua Peak, I believe, is the most recent one added, and that is going to be the Canthan one. So this was some of the first instances where we got to see some of the Canthan features, some of the Canthan architecture and the plants and everything that they're going to be using. So that's fractals. If I go over here, you can see the raid lobby. The Lion's Arch Aerodome is a separate map where people can group for raiding. Raiding is similar to Fractals, in which it has a very specific... It has a very specific, different story that it tells. So if I go here, you can see all the different raid wings that there are. Spirit Vale, Salvation Pass, Stronghold of the Faithful, Bastion of the Penitent, Hall of Chains, Key of Adashim, and Mythrite Gambit. This is a training area. They are scattered across the map. So Forsaken Thicket is right here. Bastion of the Penitent is right there. Right here, Hall of Chains. I believe Bastion of the Penitent and Forsaken Thicket have different raid wings, and that is what you see here. And then you come down here, you get the the Key of Adashim, sorry, and then I believe there's a there's not a Canthan raid at this point. Raids come in separate from regular story, and so do Fractals. They are just kind of side pieces that are more difficult than typical story. Now, the thing that actually does tie in the most to the story is meta events. You have world bosses in Corteria. There are meta events in some of the maps that show little pieces of the story. But if you go and watch my videos on the Canthan meta events, Saitung Province shows how the locals are fighting with the Aether Blades. New Kaineng is a power outage, and it gives you some story on how the city of New Kaineng handles its electricity, how the mechs are having issues. The Echovolt Wilds meta shows you how the Jade Brotherhood and the Speakers are at war, and Dragon's End is directly related to the story. Every meta typically gives you a piece of story. Dragonfall, the whole meta is involved in the story because there's 3 lanes. Sandswept Isles has to do with the inquest in the area. Domain of Istan tells you about how Palawadan is entirely in the grasp of Palawajoko. It used to be called Kamadan, if I remember correctly, from Guild Wars 1. So each of the different maps typically has a meta event. One of the easiest ways to get information on them is if you go to the wiki, there is a specific event timers page. For Corteria, I'm going to pull it up on the screen actually. You can see here, for Corteria, you have the top, you have Day-Night Cycle, World Bosses, the difficult World Bosses, Lane Line Anomaly, and PvP tournaments. Season 1, this is all the content that was just added, and you can see the time slots that they're coming up at different times. Living World Season 2, you have just Dry Top, Heart of Thorns, every single map. Living World Season 3, just Lake Doric. What is tracked here is major meta events. So there's not just one map in Living World Season 3 and one map in Season 2. There's actually 2. But the other maps aren't on a set time schedule. And ultimately, that's what this comes down to. Every single one of the Path of Fire maps has a set time schedule for the meta events. Same with these maps of Living World Season 4, Icebrood Saga, End of Dragons. And most of them are rather profitable to do. There, for a time, was a train that would go through all the Living World Season 4 maps because Volatile Magic was so profitable, and they would just go from one meta to the next, and farm tons of Volatile Magic, tons of Karma, experience, and get rich. Right now, according to the Fast Guild, typically the newest content is going to be the most profitable. So the current farm train that is the most profitable is going to be the Dragon's End meta. And then the Echovolt Wilds meta, and then actually Drizzlewood Coast, which is all the way up here. And then Dragonfall, back down here. And then the least is going to be actually the World Bosses, which is the oldest content in the game. There's a lot of waiting around in that one. because as I just showed, there's a specific time. It's every 15 minutes for those events, and the boss dies in maybe 5-10 minutes if it's a difficult one. So you just have 5 minutes of sitting around.
As I knew it would.
And then there's a ton of different metas that you can do. Those are typical PvE content that people run. If you go to Y and you go to Central Tyria, you can find squads for Silver Waste. This is Silver Waste. This is Living World Season 2 content. If I go to End of Dragons, depending on the time, you can see all the different groups that are joining here. So if you want to try the meta events, go to LFG, find a commander, and learn what the meta is about before you do it. If you want to see the End of Dragons, I have 3 of them. I will have 3 of them up by the end of today, hopefully. The one that I have Dragon's Den and Echovolved Wilds. I need to do New Kaining and Saitung, which Saitung I will be posting later today, and New Kaining will come hopefully this week. If you have questions, typically there's a commander on the map. If we're in a time where the map is pretty populated. Otherwise, feel free to ask me. If you have a question, ask me in the comments. If you see me in game, feel free to send me a message. I would love to help people be more comfortable, be more confident. I've commanded a bunch of different meta events. I've commanded a whole bunch of different things. So if you see me, feel free to say hi. If you are watching the video, feel free to like, subscribe. Tell me what you want to see. I would love to show you guys, help anybody that's watching and help them see the things that they want to see. You know, if you have questions, if you want to see guides on certain things, there's a lot of other content creators out there who have good guides. If there's better ones out there, I can maybe even help direct you to them, or I can help you run through metas. If you have been trying to do for example, one of the general, where is it? Triple Trouble. This is one of the ones that I've been trying to finish. It might actually not be under Triple Trouble. It might be under bosses. Yeah. Cobalt Wormslayer and Crimson Wormslayer. This is one of the hardest meta events when it came out. That's down here in Bloodtide Coast. And I've been wanting to get that done. So if you, for example, want to get an achievement like that done, feel free to come and ask me. And I will do what I can to coordinate and get that done. So always happy to help, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.